let's watch this clip.
Is there anything wrong during a dispute between a husband and a wife for the husband to say to his wife, you have to obey me, Allah has commanded you to obey me? How can anyone actually say it's wrong for someone to quote Quran and Sunnah? But there's a very important thing I want you to focus on. And I've said it before, and people don't understand this, and I think I'll take the opportunity now to explain it. When people start quoting Quran and Sunnah, this is my quote, when spouses start quoting Quran and Sunnah on one another, that marriage is on the rocks. We're in a dangerous, dangerous zone, crisis zone.
So immediately, and he knows it too, this sounds very bizarre. So quoting Quran and Sunnah in a marriage means that your marriage is on the rocks? Just like, that's a very bizarre thing to say. And to start the answer to this question, does the wife have to obey her husband? This is what you're starting off with, okay?
You see, as I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent down this book, and He sent His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to help us and guide us, and we should always be quoted and always be in the foremost of our thoughts and our practices. And we all need reminders. We all need to ensure that we're on top of the game. But relationships are still based upon good old generic values that don't always need the Kitab and Sunnah, the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to regulate it.
Can you believe this? So it's always good to have reminders. It's always good to, have Quran and Sunnah for that purpose. But marriage is based on generic values that don't necessarily involve the Quran and Sunnah. Let's just let that marinate for a second. Or here, I'll repeat it because I don't want to be accused of misrepresenting what he's saying.
But relationships are still based upon good old generic values that don't always need the Kitab and Sunnah, the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to regulate it. Marriage is...
So are these generic values not part of the Quran and Sunnah? Are they separate values from the Quran, what the Quran and Sunnah teach? It's not exactly clear. You can interpret it both ways. You can interpret them as saying that there are generic values that are just known, by everyone, and they're generic. So they're not specific to Islam. They're not specific to what is being taught in the Quran and Sunnah. If he's saying that, that is more problematic. Or he could be saying these are just generic things that obviously the Quran and Sunnah endorse these values or teach these values, but they are also known apart from the Quran and Sunnah. That's still problematic, I think, but it's not as problematic. So what are these generic values that he's referring to? So let's see what he says.
Are relationships of love and sacrifice and give and take. And if you are in a scenario where you feel that you need to quote the law and get your rights or get what you want by a threat of the law of punishment in the hereafter and so on, we have come so far down the hill. We have now we're in free fall. It's not even at the top where we're just tripping and sliding and, falling over. We're at the bottom because this
is unbelievable. So you can't cite, if you're in a marriage, and I have a feeling that he's just talking about husbands, right? He's just talking about husbands because the question is, does the wife have to obey her husband? So the scenario is that the husband is quoting the law, meaning the Sharia of Allah. He's quoting Quran and Sunnah in order to get his rights, the right of obedience or other kinds of rights that he is due in the marriage. So if he cites Quran and Sunnah, this is a big problem. This is a big problem. It's not a problem that she is violating his rights. That's not the problem. You'll notice. The problem is when the husband is trying to get his rights and he cites the Quran and Sunnah. Isn't this a funny little twist? He's turned everything upside down. The whole point of the question is that the wife is disobedient, or the question is, should the wife obey her husband, or should she just be independent? She's the boss lady, queen. The queen doesn't have to obey anyone. And in this kind of model of marriage, there's no king, because they don't call Muslim men kings. They don't call Muslim husbands kings, but it's the Muslim wives who are the queens. And the queen doesn't obey. She's the boss. The husband should thank Allah that he has such a queen. Like, he's the fortunate one. He's the one who should obey. This is the model of marriage that is promoted by those who have this false idol of feminism. So he's completely flipped the scenario where the husband, if he is going to cite Quran and Sunnah, first of all, why cite Quran and Sunnah? These are generic values of love in marriage, so you don't need the Quran and Sunnah for love. So that's mistake number one. But then you're citing Quran and Sunnah as a husband to get your rights. How dare you? How dare you cite Quran and Sunnah? That just shows how insecure you are and that you don't understand the generic values of love and mercy and compassion. Your marriage is on the rocks. Your marriage is not only, tumbling down the hill, or tumbling down the mountain. It's at the bottom. It's dead, basically.
If I want some tea from my wife, I should expect to say, hey, honey, can you bring me a cup of tea? And that would be the end of it. If she is saying, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Blah, 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 blah. Is the answer for me to say, because Allah commanded you to bring the tea? Or for me to actually think, why have I upset her so much? What have I done to my wife, my deficiency, that she was not even happy from out of just a love relationship to be able to go and give me the tea? Like my...
So now you get the idea here. So you ask your wife, honey, can you bring me some tea? And she says, no. Absolutely not. Why should I get you your tea? So instead of him talking to the sisters or advising the sisters and telling them that, look, you have certain responsibilities in a marriage, you want to keep things very happy, and you want to be agreeable, you want to cooperate. He's doing so much as your husband for you, he's providing for you. Why don't you, it's okay to treat your husband and take care of him, like that's your role as a wife. Instead of giving that Islamic response, maybe citing the example of the Sahaba, the Sahabiyat, Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, who were bringing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam food, they're bringing him drink, they would clean his clothes, they'd wash his clothes, they would do the dishes, all of these kinds of domestic tasks, they would cook. Instead of bringing up these examples, he's not even speaking to the women. He's not even speaking to these Muslim wives. He's only focusing on the husbands and telling them that, why do you even have these expectations? If your wife is not bringing you tea when you want, the problem is you. You're the problem. You need to figure out why. You haven't done enough. You need to man up. You're not man enough if she's not bringing you tea, because obviously all women are angels. All women are so good and nice, and if you see anything that you don't like from them, it's because of you. You're the problem. So this just reveals the kind of mentality, the kind of mindset, and the assumptions that this guy has about marriage and about women and men. And it's just shocking. Like, it's shocking for someone who claims to be a traditional imam or a scholar who is teaching. Like, he's with this institute. He's talking in context of a course that he teaches. It's called Protect This House. And he teaches this course to hundreds, thousands of Muslims, men and women. And this is the kind of message that he's peddling. If this clip is representative, I haven't actually taken this course, but if this is in any indication of what the course is about, this is a bad sign. It's very bad. Because again, the question is, does the wife have to obey her husband? That's a very simple question that should be answered in a very direct way. Yes, look at these ayat, look at these hadith. Look at the example of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's talk about the concept of ta'ah, which means obedience. let's look at, all of this and answer this question: does the wife have to obey her husband? The Quran and Sunnah are highly relevant, but he doesn't want to talk about the Quran and Sunnah because it violates feminism. He wants to talk about this kind of feminist counseling, positive psychology. Oh, if she's upset, it's probably your fault. She's not bringing you your tea, if she's not, taking care of the kids, if she's not doing her domestic responsibilities, if she's, defying you, you tell her something, she does the opposite, you're the problem. This is completely, unhinged. It's completely detached from reality and the reality of so many, unfortunately, Muslim marriages that are being destroyed because of the actions of women and the wrong ideas of marriage and the wrong ideas of relationships that women are learning, not only from the media, not only from the society, not only from universities, not only from feminist relatives, but now also these imams. Also, these supposedly traditional imams are now preaching the same toxic message, toxic feminist message.
My wife, for example, technically, yeah, the hadith exists that a woman's not to be leaving the home without her husband's permission, etc. And she comes to me thinking that every single time that I'm going to ask if I can go out, I don't want her to do that. And
look at the way that he talks about this hadith. Yeah, technically this hadith exists. Technically.
Like my wife, for example, technically, yeah, the hadith exists.
He almost was going to put his, quotes up. Technically, the hadith exists. Like, what was he trying to quote there? Do you see that? Did you catch that?
Well, technically, yeah.
So this is when he has this kind of dismissive attitude towards hadith, with this kind of body language and facial expression, statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How are women going to take this? How are Muslims going to take these hadith? He's already belittled hadith and also Quran by saying that, look, it's not relevant. Like, if you're bringing up hadith, if you're bringing up Quran in your marriage, this is a sign that your marriage is on the rocks. It's a failure. It's a moral failing to bring up Quran and hadith. And just look at his attitude. Like, technically the hadith exists, but why do we need to bother with hadith? So this is very, very serious, very problematic.
Hadith exists that a woman's not to be leaving the home without her husband's permission, etc. And she comes to me thinking that every single time that I'm going to ask if I can go out, I don't want her to do that. And she should never have to feel to do that, except if she is in a unstable, insecure state, because she knows the relationship has become so weak between us and the level of trust has broken down to such a level that she feels she has to ask. And instead, what it should be is that she knows that I intrinsically trust her, and there is no reason that I should not let her go, even though, of course, technically speaking, she needs my permission, but she has my permission. She doesn't.
Again, the quotes again. Technically, he gives saying technically. So just because she has to obey and she has to ask for permission, that means you don't trust her. Like, is that what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying? When it comes to like her going out of the house, she needs permission. Who she lets into the house, she needs permission. Into your house, she needs permission for that. Who she is associating with, it being required for her to get permission from her husband, does that mean that she's not trustworthy? Does that mean that she's a bad person, that she's dishonest? No. That's like saying, you can bring any kind of analogy where there's a chain of command, like you have an army or you have a business or you have a government. There's a chain of command, and there are certain procedures that you have to be followed, and that those procedures are necessary to keep things running smoothly. It's not that just because the soldier has to ask his lieutenant before doing something, that the lieutenant doesn't trust the soldier. Or in a business, just because the vice president has to confirm with the president about something, or the president has to sign off on these decisions, that doesn't mean the president doesn't trust the vice president. That's just the way that a hierarchical organization with a chain of command has to work. for the sake of being stable and consistent and productive, and in the context of marriage, for happiness, for the smoothness of the relationship. But the advice that he's giving here is to say that no, she's independent. She can make the decisions herself. She doesn't need my input. She doesn't need my permission. I trust her, you know. We're two trusting individuals. We're partners. We're trusting partners, and we're equal partners, basically. That's what this means. Because if he says, yes, this hadith is important, this hadith should be followed, this hadith should be cited in your marriage, instead of affirming the teaching of the hadith, he's saying, oh, technically, yeah, it's saying this, but forget about it. That's basically what he's saying. You know, forget about what this is saying, because this hadith is misogynistic. That's the subtext. Would they use quotation marks when a husband calls the wife to bed? Is the speech marks next to angels will curse her? Yeah, there are so many hadith about obedience that the wife has to show to her husband, but that's a good scenario. Like if a wife was complaining, my husband is not providing for me. My husband is not paying for my basic needs. He is not paying for my children. Would Abu Eesa tell that woman, that mother, that, oh, well, don't bring up the Quran and Sunnah? Like, did you do anything to make your husband upset? Did you do anything to make your husband angry with you? Did you show enough mercy to him? You're the problem. You need to be a better wife. That's why he's not providing for you. He wouldn't give that response. For that, then yeah, suddenly the Quran and Sunnah is very relevant when it's women's rights that are being denied. Women's rights being denied. Yeah, we need to bring the hammer of the law. We need to exercise any means necessary to get what women are due, and even more than their due. But when it comes to men's rights, what men are due in marriage, then, oh, don't bring up Quran and Sunnah. This is not a legal matter. Have you considered your failings as a person? Have you considered your failings as a husband and how that's contributed? So this is a blatant double standard, and it's very destructive.
Doesn't need to quote the Quran and Sunnah, but if she does, that's because she doesn't feel that the relationship is right, and you also don't feel that the relationship is right. So she doesn't need to quote the Quran and Sunnah. Of course, technically speaking, she needs my permission, but she has my permission. She doesn't need to quote the Quran and Sunnah, but if she does, that's because she doesn't feel that the relationship is right, and you also don't feel that the relationship is right. So
if the wife comes and says, you know, I'm going to go take a trip, you know, or I'm going to, you know, be gone for most of the day, I don't need your permission. She doesn't even to help inform her husband. She should just go because you trust her. I'm just going to go out of town, or I'm going to, you know, be gone for the whole day, or I'm going to somewhere that it's none of your business. Does the husband then have to, what recourse does the husband have in that case? Clearly he can't cite hadith in that situation. So how is he going to address that problem, that my wife is just going somewhere, I don't know where she is, I don't know who she's with, she didn't even inform me, let alone ask my permission? How is that situation addressed? And you go to Abu Eesa, and he gives this kind of advice. So this is very destructive. In a healthy marriage, there is trust. The man and the woman, the husband and the wife, they trust each other, and things are smooth, and it's not like a boss who is just barking orders at his employee. No, that's not what marriage is about. There's love and sacrifice and mercy and all of those things, but there's also a chain of command. There is also rights and responsibilities that have to be maintained. That's also extremely important. And if that's what teaching the law is all about. So is Abu Eesa just going to be this kind of feminist counselor, or is he going to teach the Quran and Sunnah? If people want to know about like great marriage tips and advice, and they want to, you know, be counseled in that way, they can go to a counselor. They can go to these non-Muslim counselors that will give them all kinds of usually bogus advice. But that's something separate, you know, separate from the question of whether that counseling is legitimate or not Islamically. It's something that is different than what him as a scholar, I'll use the quotes, a scholar, he should be teaching the law. He should be teaching chain of command. He should be teaching hierarchy. He should be teaching that's the message he needs to get out to these women who are being counter messaged contrary to Islam every single day. And because there is such a heavy feminist message of equality marriage that's going out, people like him who want to sit there and pretend to be scholars, they have more of a responsibility. They have more of a responsibility to counter that, not to just go with the status quo and give this embarrassing explanation of a very clear-cut question. Does the wife have to obey her husband in Islam? Something that there is absolutely no ikhtilaf on, no dispute, no, there's really, this is not an issue of, oh, he's just going by a separate interpretation of Islam. This is even across sects of Islam, outside of Ahlus Sunnah even, there's no disputing this point.
So I just want to say that in Protect This House, my class on these issues, we do go into the causes for conflict and problems between spouses, and the kind of viewpoint to hold when you're suffering and struggling, and the marriage is not a short-term issue; it's the long game. And to play the long game, you need certain qualities, a certain level of stamina, which is religiously guided, but ultimately deals with the core of your own heart. And we're going to look at that as well, inshallah. But I hope.
So for marriage, you need certain characteristics. Okay, sure, that's not in dispute. Like, you have to cultivate certain kind of traits as a husband, especially as a wife, especially. Like, wives need to be agreeable. Husbands need to be reliable. Husbands need to be confident. Husbands need to be merciful. Wives need to be merciful. Wives need to take on this attitude of self-sacrifice and of service and obedience. Husbands need to take this attitude of accountability. So yeah, these are all important traits that I don't know if that's what he's teaching in his course, but these are important traits. But that's only part of it. The big part of it that is being ignored in this clip, when if he was answering a separate question about what's the best way to resolve a dispute, or what's the best way to resolve a conflict. Okay, in one case, she didn't want to bring you tea. Okay, in that case, what is the other underlying issue? Like, why is she upset? If my wife, for example, she was upset at me, if it's just a one-time situation, I'll want to know, well, oh, what's happening, dear? What's happening? Are you okay? Did I do something wrong? Let's talk about it. Like, yeah, that's great advice, but that's separate from, well, what is the law? What are the responsibilities that my wife has? If she never wants to bring me something, or she never wants to cook for me, if she never wants to, take on these kinds of domestic responsibilities, she just thinks that, no, I don't have to contribute anything to the household. I don't have to contribute anything to the marriage. You're just lucky that you have me as a spouse. I don't even have to provide intimacy, because it's my body, my choice. I don't have to provide anything to you and contribute anything to this marriage. You work and you make money. Your money is my money as a wife, and my money is my money as a wife. So it's like zero contribution. This is the idea that is being taught. It's being taught by society, by the universities, by the media. And rather than counter this message by saying, no, Islam is a completely different system. In Islam, wives do have responsibilities. In Islam, there is a chain of command. In Islam, there is obedience that the wife has to show to her husband. This kind of structure of marriage needs to be taught. It has been taught by traditional imams and scholars, real ulama. But then you have charlatans who are disrupting this. They are disrupting this because they want to dress like traditional imams. They want to talk like they are traditional imams, despite the air quotes for hadith, and saying, don't bring up Quran and Sunnah in your marriage. But they're not teaching the actual structure and the spirit of Islamic marriage. So this is a disaster, and it's causing tangible harm. Like, marriages are breaking up. And as I said, a brother sent me this video and said, please respond to it. Please respond, because there are women who are citing this guy for their feminist interpretation, further feminist disruption of marriage. So this is not some kind of random video that has no influence. Like this kind of teaching, whether it's on a YouTube or it's on the mimbar and the masjid, this has a huge effect.
Hope that you understand the message that I'm giving you. Please try to understand that relationships are successful because of human qualities to one another. Sacrifice, giving and taking. The Quran and Sunnah should not be used unless it's absolutely necessary, because that's a legal process that we don't even want to be talking about right now.
So that he saved the worst statement for the end, I guess. Successful marriages based on human qualities, not Quran and Sunnah. That's essentially what he's saying, right?
And look at that as well, inshallah. But I hope that you understand the message that I'm giving you. Please try to understand that relationships are successful because of human qualities to one another. Sacrifice, giving and taking. The Quran and Sunnah should not be used unless it's absolutely necessary, because that's a legal process that we don't even want to be talking about right now.
We don't want to talk about the legal process. We don't want to talk about the Quran and Sunnah. I mean, it's very clear. He again emphasized the distinction that he made earlier between generic values that, human sacrifice, human qualities, mercy, and so forth, love, and then the Quran and Sunnah. As if the Quran and Sunnah don't teach love, by the way. As if, like, the Quran and Sunnah, like, the assumption here is that without Quran and Sunnah, you can have, like, a loving marriage. No. You think that these non-Muslims have loving marriages? No. These feminist non-Muslim marriages have no love. How can there be love? How can there be love in such marriages? 70% now, it's getting to that kind of level of these kinds of marriages end up in divorce. So where's the love? Where's the mercy? You wouldn't believe, like, the kind of statistics. So yeah, Quran and Sunnah will teach you love, because it's not a separate thing. Following Islam, following the law, following the Sharia of Allah, following the Quran and Sunnah, that is the prerequisite to reach love, to reach self-sacrifice, to reach those kinds of human qualities. It is the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the example of the Sahaba, the Sahabiyat. That's what teaches us those human qualities. So of course we need to have those kinds of things. And yes, we need to talk about them in our marriages. We need to talk with our spouses about the Quran and Sunnah, about these examples. That's important, especially when imams like this guy aren't going to teach them and talk about them. So this is a disaster, subhanAllah. This is really, really shocking. But this is one video that was brought to my attention. How many more videos like this have been polluting the internet? This is from 4 years ago. This video has been on the internet, has about 37,000 views. And, where's the response? That's what worries me, is where's the outrage? Like, there should be 10 response videos to this. 10 response videos from 4 years ago. As soon as it came out, there should be Muslims and other knowledgeable, and whether it's a da'iyah or it is an imam somewhere, just open up a webcam. Webcams are cheap. They come built in with laptops nowadays. They have a mic. Record a video and put it up. On basic knowledge, refute this guy, refute all of this trash. It doesn't require this high level of Islamic learning. Like, just the basics of Islam, you can understand what he's saying is completely wrong. So I hope that there'll be more of that in the future, inshallah. But that's why I'm worried about, like, how many more of these kinds of videos are out there that haven't been responded to, and people just assume that this is correct. This is what Islam teaches. So it's very scary. And then we wonder, why is the Muslim community becoming so liberal? And why are women taking off their hijab? Why are so many marriages ending up in divorce? Why are my children leaving Islam? People come with these kinds of complaints, and we see it. We wonder why. Well, look, for years, this content is up there. People are consuming it. Muslims are getting most of their education nowadays from social media, from YouTube. It's not that hard to put 2 and 2 together, the cause. So may Allah protect us all.